What's going on, guys? We're back now to discuss everything there is to know about Monday's views and dashboards, and also the amazing widgets that we can build inside of them. There's a lot we have to cover in this video, so be patient. Hopefully you guys will like it, and let's jump right in and see how it looks. So the views are right up here at the top. The dashboards we will find right here in the workspace section. And then widgets are found within each of them. So within the views, we have different widgets. Within the dashboards, we have different widgets as well. And so when we're taking a look at the views section right now, the singular view that we always get whenever we create a new board is the main table or the table view. So if I go into any other board, we could see main table. So we always get a table view because that is the standard of how we view the data in Monday. Now let's go back real quick to this portfolio board. And what I've done over here is laid out a bunch of different views, and each of these views are a single widget. So in the views section, just remember, generally speaking, every single view is going to be a single widget, except for this one, which says Customizable view. So this is going to be a view that you could create multiple widgets in one view. And then on the side panel here on the left, the dashboard that we create is going to be a multiple widgets type of a layout. So I wouldn't call it a view because we don't want to confuse the terminology. Views are up here. Dashboards are over here. Singular widget views, a multiple widget view, and also a multiple widget dashboard. So let's take a look. Let's first start out with the table view. So obviously, the table itself is the initial view we always get on every single type of board that we open up, because this is the standard of how we view data in Monday. It's always a table. Now, what we should do, and this is best practices, is create a custom table, which is just another table view. So if we were to hit the plus icon, we could see here all of the different view types. And I've included them, of course, up here, and we're going to go over them one by one. But anytime, whenever you want to do different types of filters, sorts, conditional formattings, group bys, we want to create another table. And the reason why we want to do this is because it is best practices. Think of your main table as just a unfiltered, unsorted, raw view of your data. So we don't want to have any sort of formatting, any sort of conditionals in this view. We want to keep this original and untouched. So what we do is we create another view. I've just renamed it custom table. And what I've actually done is, if you go into the three dots, I've pinned this view. So I like to create a custom table or tables. Usually I create one, but depending on the situation, I will create multiple. And I like to pin that view over here all the way at the left, because I want to not touch this main table, and I just want to always work in my custom table. So let's take a look at what we can do in this custom table. So we have obviously the search function. We could search pretty much everything we want in the board itself. The filter by person. So if I wanted to see only the projects that was attached to myself, if I do this, I can only see the ones that is attached to me. Or if I just put Nick Parker, for instance, it will show up of all the projects that Nick Parker has been assigned in the people column. And this is a filter board by person. This is seeing the items where a people column or a person column exists. This is when that exists, so that Monday can see, okay, if there's a people column, let's filter it by one or more of those different people that are assigned into this column. Now, the filter section, it's self-explanatory. If you just do this as a drop-down, Monday gives you a way of doing either, let's go to quick filters. So a way of doing quick filters, which it's just, hey, I only want to find all the projects that have me tagged in it, all the projects, let's say, that are named Project Alpha. We can see it's changing over here. So these are singular choice filters. Of course, we could choose more over here. So let's say everything that is tagged with my name, pending start, and then let's say if we want to say if it has a project budget of 240,000. And we could see obviously those filters match only a single project called Project Alpha. So, and let's switch back to the quick filters again. That's just what it is. It's a super quick way. Usually this is used if you want to filter based on one column and on one metric. So it's just a quick way of choosing something and seeing a quick display in your table area. So let's clear everything here. And now let's go back to where the advanced filters was. So the difference here is in the advanced filters, we are able to create multi-level groups of filters. So let's say if I wanted to choose a filter that had the project manager, let's see what this column is called, project manager. So if I go to filter, let's go to advanced filters. If I want to do where the project manager is myself, and this is one quick tip that I'm going to recommend as well. In both the advanced filter and the quick filters, if you see this word dynamic, this is a really cool feature that it's not a static field, it's a dynamic field or a dynamic entry. So what this means is if I choose dynamic, it means that anyone else coming into this table view where the project is this me dynamic, this means that if hypothetically Nick Parker was to come into this table, he would only see everything that was assigned to him because this is a dynamic filter. It is not a static filter. So if it was just assigned to my name, then no matter who came in here, they would only see things filtered where the project was under my name. But if you do the me, this is a dynamic filter where whoever the user is that has logged into the account, they will only see what belongs to them. So for right now, let's just put me over here, a static filter, and then we are also going to create maybe another filter. Let's say the date. We should have a date field. Oh, we have a timeline field, so we could create a timeline right here. And the timeline, project timeline is, let's see, ends before, let's say, today. Okay? And we can see all of these projects are ones that ended before today because we have the date, end date of 2022. We're obviously in 2026. So it's going to keep that there. Now, another quick thing to let you know, when I say dynamic and static, these filters are still dynamic. So no matter what information changes in the table itself, these filters are always going to dynamically keep filtering that data to make sure it is accurate per these filters. The only thing that I'm saying in terms of dynamic and static is this people column where we choose either a dynamic user, whoever's logged in, or a specific person that we're trying to choose to filter the data by. So, and then what we can do with this advanced filters feature, as opposed to the quick filters, is we could create these groups. So this was one group. Let's say every project that had Narek Papukian attached to it on the people column, and it ends before today. And we saw that everything is in 2022. Now, this group is going to be a AND group or an OR group. So we are creating essentially filter groups. So we could say we either want this, or maybe I want the project manager to be Nick Parker, and the project is maybe on a timeline that is ending after today. So this is just a very quick example. You could see that, hey, maybe we want to see all the projects that belong to me ending before today, or all of the projects that belong to Nick Parker that end after today. So if we just exit this out, it's being obviously dynamically filtered over here. And since it's an OR function, it's going to include either the first group or the last group of filter criteria. And now one thing to remember all the time is whenever you are creating these filters, the sort, the group bys, always make sure to click Save to this view. If you do not save these filters, sorts, group by criteria that you created, and you go to another view, you're going to lose all of this. So always click Save. And another thing to note on why we are creating this custom table view as opposed to simply filtering in everything in the main table. And that is because when we try to save a filter criteria, a sort criteria, a group by criteria in the regular main table, it doesn't actually save it. It does not save it at all. So when you end up going to another view type and you go back to main table, Monday by default clears out all of those filters, sorts, and group bys because it wants to create the main table as a unfiltered, unsorted, ungrouped by raw format. So again, if you're ever going to use these conditionals, always use a custom table or tables and then just save it to that view. So we have that as the filter. We can now also sort the data. So let's say, obviously the name being alphabetical, ascending or descending. We could also sort by pretty much every other column type. And if it's a timeline, which is a date, ascending or descending, same thing again, keeping it in an order of dates. Very self-explanatory. And then we will just say save to this view again to keep this. And just to show you, if I go out of here to, let's say, the Gantt chart, which we will get into in just a second, and I go back into custom table, it's still saved. If I was to do that, just as an example, in the main table, let's say I choose where the name is just Project Alpha, let's just say. And I do save at, and oh, there we go. See, save as new view. Monday is not even allowing you to save it to this view. It's saying save as new view. So let's say I didn't save it. I went to another view, click here, and then click back. You'll see it just reverted back to the raw table with no conditionals being saved. So just remember that, keep that in the back of your mind. Always create a brand new table. Now the next thing is the hide functionality. If we want to, and this is super, super important. A lot of clients have said, well, I don't want to see everything on this board. Let's say we had 100 different columns, hypothetically speaking. Well, there's kind of two ways to go about it. And actually, technically, it's one way to go about it. Well, I would say two ways. So one way would be you create this custom view. Instead of deleting those column types, because if you delete it from one view, it's going to delete it from the entire board in and of itself. So you cannot delete a column in one table view and still have it show up in another table view. No, it actually deletes it completely from the board. So what you do is you create a custom table. And let's say if you had hypothetically 100 columns here, you could just create a table called simple view, and you could go in here and you hide everything until you want to keep only what you want to keep. So let's say all we care about is viewing who the project manager is on this view right here. Well, we could just view the project manager, hypothetically speaking, and this would be, let's say, the project manager view, for instance. And then we could have another view that had all the other column types included and showing. And of course, the main table will always have all of the column types showing. So that is kind of the functionality that you could do over here as well. So we'll revert it back to showing all of the columns, and we will just save that to the view so that we have all of the columns saved over here. Now, let's see what else we have besides the hide function, the group by. So this is a very, very cool feature that you can use to essentially turn any type, well, not necessarily any type, but a lot of your different column types as a grouping function. So if we see the groups over here, pending, start, active, close projects, right? What if instead of viewing the groups over here as the way it is now, we wanted to kind of group them by the project phases? So the wrong way of doing it would be someone would go, oh man, I got to change all this. So they would then rename this group into upcoming, then they would rename this into planning, then they would rename this into execution. But instead of doing it that way, all we have to do is we keep our standard grouping, okay? So think of this as the default grouping that we always want to have available. And then we just do group by. We select the column name, which was again this status column called project phase. Select group by. Let me zoom out. Go to project phase, this green status column as we see. And we say an order of labels. We could do it either ordering the specific label way that we arranged it, either up or down, or we could order the labels as A to Z or Z to A. And as you could see, take a look at what happened. Upcoming is upcoming, planning is planning, execution is execution. So it just regrouped it based on the status column. Super, super cool. And we can revert it back by simply clearing this right here. Here's a clear button. I clear it, and it's back to our standard groupings. And we could group it by so many other types of columns. So if I wanted to group it by the budget, I could just choose this. And these numbers now, the project budget, become the grouper, as we could see, and it's ascending. Really, really cool stuff. And obviously, if you wanted to keep it that way, you would click Save to View, but we're just going to clear it out for now. And there's a few other things we can do as well, which are really what gives more color and a lot more personality to the board. So a few things. We can pin columns. So if, let's say, every single time, and this works for much bigger boards. So right now we have only a few different columns, but let's say if I had 100 columns, I could use the pin by feature to say, hey, I always want to see all the way up to project phase instead of just the item name. I could just pin project phase, and basically every single time, let's see if we can do it over here. Now we can't really show it because the amount of columns are small, but it would act just like in Excel or in Google Sheets, where you would scroll to the right and project phase would always stay showing. So the rest of these would keep scrolling and cycling, but project phase, project manager would always show up. So that's the pin columns. All right, so now let's take a look at the item height. So right now we have a single line height. We could do a double line, a triple line. And so if I do this, or I do this, you could see that each of the rows themselves become like a single space, double space, triple space. So really cool if you want to view your records a bit larger, or if you want to view them a bit more compressed. Now let's take a look at a few other options we have. This is one of the coolest ones that I use in Monday. And this is a really awesome way. Remember when I mentioned before giving color to your data? Well, conditional coloring it is. So this one is used in a variety of factors. So what I could do is I can either color the cell. So this would be a single value that is in one of the columns, or the entire row based on a set criteria. And we have different color options over here. So let's say when so this is one example that I use it for. This one's a good one. If you have certain groups, for instance, that you want to be able to match that color to the color of your record, conditional coloring is one way to do it. So let me just adjust the item height to single real quick. So let's say we want to do a conditional coloring that if anything is pending start, to just color it this orange color. If anything is active, color it the green. And if anything is closed, let's color it this bluish color. Super easy. This is just one simple example that we could do. So we go to conditional coloring. I'm going to choose the orangish color first. I believe this should be it. And let's just do cell for now. When we say the group is pending start. And I'm going to do, again, actually, oh, we did row. Well, oh, I see. Okay, so in this one, it's going to do the whole row. So whenever we're doing the group, it will do the row because we're talking about the group. And if we do a specific column type, it will give us the option of cell or row. So if I X this out, if I was to do, let's say, the people column, we can then do row or cell because this is an actual column type. If I do the timeline, same thing. We could choose either cell or row because it is an actual column type. But since group belongs to the entire item itself, when we choose group, it's only going to allow us to do just the row. See? Coloring cells is disabled for this column type. And technically, it's not a column type. It's the group. But we get the point. So we keep this as orange. We're going to say green is going to be, let's say, row when the group is active. And we'll do this one pending start. And we're just going to do closed projects. So this will obviously be row whenever the group is closed projects. And we want to do this blue color, for instance. Now let's do save to this view. Now look at this. Visually, let's assume we were not looking at the group name. We could see visually now this is a orange, green, and blue. Now this comes in handy when you start combining it with other types of conditionals that you're choosing over here, and specifically the group by. So we can obviously see that this standard grouping is color matched to its group. But now if I was to do the group by project phase, this color is going to be preserved. So we could still group by another group. And I'm going to do project phase again right here. And now look what happens. We now know that this is an upcoming project, but remember that pending start? We know this is pending start because if I was to take that color off, look at that, pending start. So you get the point. And we could just look back at that again. Planning, execution. And we can see that the planning and execution are green because they've already started. And then closure, these are all closed projects. So if we were to clear those out, so that's one use, just one of the many different uses that you can do for the colorings. So, and let me show you guys what the color will look like if you just wanted to apply it to a cell. So the group only allows it for the row. So if I X these out, and let's say instead of the group, we're going to do when, let's say, the project phase. Hypothetically, the project phase, all done labels. Okay. project phase over here is going to be, let's say, upcoming. Project phase over here is going to be planning, hypothetically speaking. And also, one thing to note for this, let me give you guys a quick tip. So what all done labels is in the status column itself, you can specify which statuses. If I go to settings, customize status column, these are the status options that we have to choose in here. You can specify which ones of these are considered done. So this done has a lot of different functions in Monday, from the dashboard views to just looking at when Monday is calculating when a certain item has reached the finish line. So we know, for instance, based on this, the closure, this bluish one, choose which colors indicate that an item is completed. It's this bluish one. So we know that closure basically means done, but everything else means the item in question is not done yet. So that's a real quick overview. And let me go back to this again, the conditional coloring. So instead of doing the rows, we are going to, okay. So in the status column, it's also forcing us to do rows. So let's choose another one. Let's see. If I'm just going to say name is alpha. Okay, let's do, this should allow us to do a cell. Yes. And let's say if this name is whiskey, and if this name is Romeo, and we save it to this view. Okay, so we could see alpha, Romeo, and whiskey. It's got the coloring. Now I want it to color by the cell. Oh, this one was row, that's why. Okay, cell and cell. There we go. Save to this view. Okay, so we could see that the cell, whenever we're specifying the cell color, it's just going to color the item name itself, and it's going to leave everything else uncolored. This is helpful if you have already certain colors, or it's going to be too much color in the rest of the column types. Then you could just choose that as coloring the cell, which will color the item name itself, or you could always switch it back to the row. So again, the cell or row conditional formatting is dependent on the type of column, or if you're doing the group, that's going to determine whether it allows you to do the cell or not. So, and that has been that. Let's clear these out. And I believe we have the last one left, default item values. So this one is useful, especially in automations, or whenever you're creating certain items in your board that you know are always going to have the same value for either the name of the item, a certain field or column in here. So give you guys an example. So let's assume in this board, I know for a fact that every single project, since this is in the portfolio board, I know that every single project created here, let's say I am going to always be the project manager. So what I would do is I would go into default item values, and I would choose myself, Narek Papukian, as the project manager, and do save. So now whenever I add, let's say, another project, you will see before I hit enter, pay attention to this field right here. It will automatically choose me. So if I hit enter, give it a second, see, there's a backend automation. We don't see this automation, but it automatically chose me as the default project manager on this due to that conditional default item value selection. So we'll just exit this out. And that is pretty much it, folks, as far as these conditionals are concerned. So let's jump into the rest of the really cool views. All right, let's take a look at the Gantt view. So the Gantt chart over here is exactly what a Gantt chart is. If those of you who are familiar with Gantt charts, It is a super fluid, functional Gantt chart. Let me just zoom in a little bit so we could see things a little bit easier. So the Gantt chart is going to be pulling data from either date or timeline columns from your table. So it doesn't matter if we use the main table or the custom table. Right now, what sort of a date field do we have in here? We have the project timeline. So the Gantt chart is going to be super helpful if either you have a timeline field, or what I like to do sometimes is having a start date and an end date field. So two separate date fields instead of just a timeline field, because for certain automations, certain things that we want to extract a specific date out of Monday, it's helpful if we have two date columns instead of just a timeline column. But for the sake of this demonstration, we are going to show how this timeline column is pulled into the Gantt chart. And if we go here, let's just click auto fit. Okay, so we could see here project alpha. It shows its two dates over here. And we could see Romeo, Whiskey, all of these projects, and the standard grouping. We could obviously collapse them, expand, collapse, and then baseline. So this baseline right here, this just opens up our settings, and we can go to what the baseline is and all that other stuff in just a second. So let me see if there's anything else I could quickly explain to you guys from here before we go into the settings. So this is today. If you click today, it will go to your today date with a blue line. Obviously, our items that we have are not overlapping anything of today. So we're just going to say auto fit, and we will see the maximum picture that Monday can show of most of our items in one screen. So we could view it as months, quarters, years, days, weeks. So however we want to view this information, okay, we'll just keep it at, let's say, quarters for now. And we could just click plus, minus, it does the same thing. So now let's go into the, and oh, by the way, we can also apply real quick, same filters that we learned as before. The person column, we could apply it so it'll show those filters and selecting certain people on a project onto the Gantt chart as well. So let's go into the settings window. And what can we do over here? Let's just see. Display type Gantt. Yep, we are going to do a Gantt chart for right now. We also have the ability of splitting the Gantt chart view with a table. So it'll kind of look like this. If I do split mode, you'll see the table showing up at the bottom if you want some sort of a quick reference to your data. But I personally always use it as just a full widget view in and of itself. I could always go to the table if I want to from the views area. So let's take a look at where the data is pulling from. Click auto fit. We could see that the timeline column is using the project timeline column that we have. We are grouping the data by the standard groups that we have, the pending, active, and closed. But the same way that we could do the group by in the table, we could actually start grouping as the project managers. We can group it as the project phases. So super, super cool in how we want to dynamically show the Gantt chart. We could pretty much display it in any way we want. We could even say, hey, what board does it come from? Well, it all comes from the portfolio board. But for right now, we're just going to keep, let's say, we'll keep it on project manager. So now we could see a division of, well, who's the project manager on these tasks or these projects, and then who's the project manager on these projects over here. All right, let's take a look at some of the other options that we have. So the label by field allows us to choose what we want to display over here, just on the right side of the specific item. So right now it's the name of the actual item, but we could change it to the project managers. We can change it to the project phase. So self-explanatory. Color by, this is a really cool feature. Again, I love visual formatting. So right now, we could see that it's colored by the board, which is this red one right here, because it's coloring it by portfolio over here. But we could choose it to color by, let's say, the project phases. And this is one thing I always do, is usually a status column. Well, what phase is this project actually in? We could color it by the group. We could color it by even the connect boards column, see? And it'll kind of do that coloring as well. So let's take it back to group. Visual settings. So certain things, if we want to display or turn off, we can show the dependencies, but see, this one doesn't exist for this one, because in order to show the dependencies, we need to add a dependency column, which we don't have in this board. So we could show the group summary. Let me show you guys what that group summary is if I toggle it on and off. This is just showing you the overall timeline of that particular group. Show the today one. This was that blue line. So if I go back to today, if I click this one right here, show today indication, that's that blue line. I always usually leave it on just so we know exactly where we're at. And let's go back to auto fit. Show weekends. We can turn that off, turn that on. This should be set according to your account settings as well. So if you want by default dates and calendars to count weekends or not, go to the settings and take care of that first before you do this, because whenever you start doing formulas or numbers or dates, there might be an inaccurate calculation. Because as you could see here, see how it says like 246 days or 121 days? You want to make sure that these numbers are correct so that you either want weekends included in your data or you don't want them included. So always do it from the admin settings first before you do it on the views. Show the color legend, and that's just down there, as we could see on the bottom of the screen. And then we could set the work days. If we wanted to edit this, yep, and see exactly, it goes into our profile account so that we could set how do we want the week to show up and whether we want weekends to be included or not. So it's super helpful that Monday already does that. So you could just kind of jump to there. So let's go back. Where were we? Into portfolio, Gantt, open the settings back up. Oh, and a real quick thing before I open up the settings back up, let me show you guys. So as you could see, this widget is kind of floating around here. I could kind of try to move it, but obviously there's no other widgets here to kind of squeeze past them. So if you want these views to be this full section of the screen instead of this little bit, all you have to do is go to your three dots over here and just click on this option right here, dock this widget. And now let's see what happens if I do that. Becomes the full screen of that view. If I am creating views that are individual widget views, I always dock them because they're the only view or the only widget to show up in that view anyway. So let's go back to the settings and let's see, where did we leave off? Okay, so we left off of visual settings. We just completed that. Let me just zoom in a little bit more and we could close the visual settings. We could do now, let's see, and give you guys a little bit more room to see everything. Let's go to, we did visual settings. Is there anything else? No. Okay. Critical path. Okay, so this one is a interesting thing that we can either have or not. This critical path is identifying all the individual tasks that must be completed to finish a project on time. So if we were to click the learn more, it explains a little bit more about that. But this is basically just an automatic way of calculating, hey, what are the tasks that we must finish in order to complete this project on time? So it's a really cool feature. It's not used in every single use case, but we could just hide it for now. You could see that this red one is being highlighted, Project Alpha, but we'll just hide it for now. Read more about it in the Learn More. It's helpful if it makes sense for your use case. The fiscal year is obviously choosing, well, what do we want to choose? We usually put January, unless you want to put another fiscal as opposed to the calendar year. And now baselines. Compare the current dates on this Gantt chart to a previous snapshot. So if we were to do a snapshot, it would essentially take a snapshot of where we're at right now, add a snapshot, and it would add that as a baseline. So this exact format of how things were, it created it as a baseline. So now look what happens. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. Since we have this snapshot created, we are showing a baseline. Now, if I move this, you'll see that that gray is still staying because it's kind of like a shadow of, hey, this is how this project's dates used to be. And look where it's changed to. So that's the snapshot feature for the baseline. So if I turn this off, it will actually, there we go, sorry, hide. There we go. So you can't click this back. You just do hide and it will hide it. That's it. So now the last thing left is groups. And this basically is saying, hey, do we want all of the items from every single group to show up here? So this comes into play whenever, let's say, we want to show only active projects here and nothing that's closed. We don't care about closed projects. So we are actually going to deactivate closed projects because all we care about is the active projects. And so you'll see that everything in this green is that active projects group. And that is the Gantt chart. And we will go over to the other widgets. All right, team. So we are now looking at the chart widget. Let me just zoom in a little bit more. Now, what you'll notice is this chart widget that we select, or this chart view that we select to see the chart widget, you are able to add more widgets into this field over here. Now, the way that this works is very, very similar to the customizable view over here, which is basically a blank canvas. If you see here, you could just add whatever widgets you want. Now, you can kind of do the same thing in the chart view as well. But what I suggest to do is instead of adding widgets to the chart view, I would say just keep the chart view docked on its own. Again, following the philosophy that if we have a singular widget, just use that widget as its own docked view. So we're just going to do dock this widget, and now we have a full chart. And let's go into the settings for this. So what can we do? We could choose a ton of different chart types, a pie chart, line chart, bubbles, you name it. Okay, so quick thing here that I want to show is I want to show you guys some of the different chart types, but you're also going to know that Monday runs into some sort of a issue or a bug, and just to how to fix it. So when we're trying to choose all the other chart types, so let's say pie chart, line chart, stacked bar, bubbles, line, and see, it just says no results were found. What ends up happening a lot of times is the x-axis and the y-axis end up clearing out. So if we were to see this screen, all we have to do is just go and make sure that we have something selected, and we will bring that data back. So if you lose that functionality of like, oh, what happened to my chart? Let's do that again. So if I start fooling around again, no results were found. It's because Monday clears out one or more of these values over here. And that's why you think, oh, there's some sort of an error, but it's just because that we lost a selection for these options over here. So let's just click on stacked bar, okay? And I'm going to show you guys how we could fix this. We go into x-axis. Let's say on the stack bar, we want the project names to be there, okay? And we are going to stack them by the project phase, okay? Now the y-axis, we're going to say the sum of the count of items. So let's say and as we saw, the chart just came back. We don't have really any issues because we chose the x and the y-axis. The y-axis was by default missing. So we could see that there's a single project for these different stages, and we can see the project names at the bottom too. We can also do, let's say, the y-axis based on the project budget, and this pulls over from that project budget column that we have, which is a number column. And so it's really, really cool. You could customize this in so many different ways besides just the x and the y-axis. I love to use the stacked bar chart because you could see more data in a single column rather than just one piece of information. So I tend to do that, but your use case might differ. So we go to customize. We could customize the color, name, and the order. Really cool stuff. So all of this, we can essentially customize. Let's see, closure is this, empty is this, execution planning. So these are all of the statuses of the status column that we have. We could choose different colors again for those status columns, categories, and we could kind of move things around. Remember, by default, that these projects usually end up based on the order that we have it in the table, but now we can mess around and we can move them as such. And of course, we could obviously change the color that we had in the status column, but we can also change the order of the legend over here too, see? So Monday is getting more and more features like this. This did not used to exist in the past, so it is really cool to see this finally come to fruition. And so a couple of different things we could do: show only top and bottom items. And then you'll see this one will pretty much not be included in the data. Show top 5 items, 4 items, 3, 2. So we could choose that if we want to. We could do cumulative data where it kind of stacks up and it adds up together. So this is if you want to show maybe as time goes on, if it makes sense for your data, where your sales are stacking up. You could do show empty values. Now, benchmark lines, I use this a lot. So if we have, let's say, a goal we want to hit, I will usually do a green line of, let's say, we need to make sure $250,000 is the benchmark line. And let's say, obviously, this is the project budget. And in this case, we would say we need a minimum budget of $250,000 for each project. As we could see, Project Major and Project Alpha fall underneath that budget. So maybe we need to find some extra financing for these projects. Again, it's all about the visualization. And we can also, forgot to mention, we could add multiple benchmark lines. So I believe we can add, let's see, how many? Oh, we could keep going, yeah. So not really any restrictions on the benchmark lines, which is nice. I do tend to run into certain restrictions into Monday, but it's nice to see that we have a bit more fluidity in the benchmark lines. The groupings, also, we could choose what groups we want to show. So if there's a completed projects group, like this one, closed projects that we don't care about, we can take that out of the picture and we just look at anything that is pending and active. This makes more sense, let's say, in our workflow. And choose which columns to show. We can choose to show or hide certain column types. So super cool, super easy. I use the charts all the time whenever I'm creating dashboards. And so you guys should too, because it's awesome. So next one, let's move on to the calendar widget. All right, so for the calendar widget, just click into calendar. Very self-explanatory. It's going to have all of your events showing up over here. So right now we don't have anything here because we're in 2026 and our data is going to show from 2022, but you would have things show up here. So let's say if we were to put this as 2026, let's just mess around with it. Oh, did I not hit enter? Come on. There we go. Okay, so let's see if we can see at least this project, Project Alpha over here in 2026. What month was it? There we are. Okay, so Project Alpha will show up over here. We could click into it. We could see the opening of that item. Lots of different settings for it as well. You know, what kind of timeline or date we want to pull up. So we could choose either a timeline column or a date or dates columns to represent the start and end dates. Color by, same thing. Label by, so we could change, here, I'll go to color by, change up the colors. Super easy, super awesome. We could label it by the group. As you can see the name over here. We could label it by the board, project manager. So super cool. Additional settings. We could show the hours if we have hours data inside of the calendar as well. We could show a color legend, which is this right here. Hide weekends, hide item names. And we have the ability of choosing the default event duration. So 30 minutes, 45, 60. This is going to be based on your workflows. I usually end up doing either 30 minutes or 60 minutes, but really up to you. And then if you don't care about showing the closed projects, you could just exit that out, or you could show it, totally up to you. So that is the calendar widget. Now let's take a look at another cool widget type known as the Kanban. Hopefully all of you guys are familiar with Kanban. Kanban is awesome. It's really the way that you want to display a board that has certain phases that are the central point of that board. So if you're doing a sales process board, or if you're doing, let's say, customer service, and you want to see in a very large, evident way of what stage things are in that sales process or in that customer service level role that you're in, and you're checking out all the customers that you have to take care of, the Kanban way is probably the best way of doing it. And you want to make sure, obviously, that everything is closed off and you're good and nothing is left hanging. So the Kanban way really shows everything a lot more clearly. So if we go into settings over here, we could see the Kanban column. This is the central thing. What status column do we want to choose to represent our Kanban cards? And since we have only one status column, it's going to be project phase. Now we can also divide by based on groups like pending start here, active down here. Super cool. We could divide it even by the connect boards column if we wanted to divide it by project golf, project Zulu that it's connected to. And we'll just turn this off for now, but really, really cool if you want to create a multi-layered Kanban style. Show the battery. So this battery is this right here. We want to obviously get everything to this blue. So we want to get everything blue here. So we could either show it or we can hide it. Super cool. The show the new Kanban view. So this is the new Kanban view. I've actually enabled this in what is known as Monday Labs over here in the settings. And I know we probably talked about this in another video, but this is if you wanted to enable your beta settings. So Monday tests things all the time, and then they pre-release it to certain customer groups so that they get some feedback from you when you're using it. The new Kanban view has been released as kind of a beta. I think at this point in time, it is here to stay. But if I was to click out of this, you'll see it goes back into a more basic state. Look what happens. See? So this is a slightly older style. We can't really see too much information on the cards themselves. I don't like this older style. I love the newer style. So I would actually go back into the show the new Kanban view. And we could see this right here. We see all these different cards and little pieces of the cards that are showing column types inside of the card itself. So this is the stage or the phase upcoming. We could drag this over. See, we could change the stages if we wanted to. We can click on one of these, change the numbers. This is the connect boards column. I could immediately click on this, see this item, and then go in there. And if I wanted to, in more detail, change things around. So it's super cool, super helpful. And that is pretty much the Kanban view. And let's see what we have here. We have updates. If there's any updates on this item, obviously you can open up the updates over here. And this is the add sub items. If you wanted to add a sub item to this, remember the items and sub items. So now it's going to add a sub project if we wanted to. Test sub project. And this would show up like that. And you could see the visual of just one sub item over here. There we go. So let's see if there's any other settings we missed. Okay, so project and sub project. So the Kanban card, this new method, allows us to drag these different available column types that we have onto this card area to kind of personalize how we want this card to view. So we have project phase here already put in. But what if, let's say, I don't care about phases because the phases are already up here. I don't want it to take up room on my card. I can just drag this out. And that's it. The phase is out of here because I got the phases all up here already. So you get to customize the card view of that Kanban card or your item cards live right there. So really cool, really, really awesome. Show column name if we want. Display cover image if we have a cover image. This is cool if you are using it for, let's say, employee profile pictures or some sort of a use case where you need some sort of a visual of an image to display each card. That will come into play over here. So, and the same thing for sub projects. You could do the same thing for the sub projects as well if we were to have the sub items opened up as well. So that is the Kanban. All right, so now let's take a look at doc. The doc view is essentially the same thing as a Monday doc that we would be creating here. So if I was to hit the plus icon and I do doc, we can obviously start with the template. If you remember, we were starting with the templates. Or if we do a new doc, you'll see when that doc shows up over here, it's going to look exactly like this one right here. So new doc here. Or if we go to the project, here we are, portfolio board, we got doc right here. So I prefer to create docs here on the left side rather than the view because a document should, in my opinion, live on its own somewhere in the beginning, like an instruction manual or whatever the use case may be. But some people do like to create it up here as its own view as well. So there's no wrong way of doing it. It's just really up to you. So you can add a ton of stuff in here, and we will actually get into docs in a separate video. All right, guys. So let's take a look now at the file gallery. So let me show you guys what I've done and how these files are showing up over here. If I go into main table, what I just did just outside of the video recording is I created a new files column and I just uploaded a picture of myself in there. So if I just exit this out, this is a PNG image, and by uploading it from my computer, it natively saved that file into each of these items. So I did it 3 times and it saved it over here. And if we go to File Gallery, what File Gallery does is it looks at this entire board and it tries to see if there's any sort of files that exist anywhere in this board, and it will create a gallery out of it. So if we just dock this, we could see that there's 3 files because I uploaded it 3 separate times. And voila, that's that. Super easy, super cool. There's not much in terms of settings that we can adjust here except show files from the files gallery and then show files from updates. And that's pretty much it. And now let's move on to the form. So the form section over here, we already covered in previous videos. You can view the form up here as the view as well. And remember, we talked about how the form can also exist as its own board and form on the left-hand side. So again, this form would be just attached to the table itself, and we'll bring in entries into this table. Now the customizable view, this is pretty much an empty canvas, a blank canvas, and this is exactly the same functionality as if we were to have this dashboard on the left-hand side. Now, if you notice, we're in the view of customizable view, but if I click on project dashboard, again, a blank canvas. So what's really the difference? This is what I will say. In the customizable view, we can pretty much add any of these single widget type of features all in here at the same time. So if I was to add widgets, let's go to more widgets. There's a bit more widgets, of course, so we could add a battery, and we know what the battery is. It's just basically a compilation of the status columns together, kind of stacked up right here. And we add widget, we could do numbers. We pull this data from a numbers column in the board itself. And there's obviously a lot more widgets that we could do. Tracking the performance with a gauge, a to-do list, I was mentioned. There's so many different things. There's time tracking. We already did the chart, calendar, and Gantt chart. And then timeline is similar to Gantt. This workload widget is something that I am going to probably describe in a separate video. This is a awesome widget for looking at workload capacity, especially if you have a company that has consultants or where a company depends on its employees having a certain workload. This measures how much work they're doing and their capacity to accept more work, or if they're overworked. So we checked out, and there's text over here, just basic text if you want to have it somewhere at the top, somewhere in the middle to separate your other widgets. Files gallery, we already did this one. Cards is similar to Kanban, although I don't use it that much. Cards is good if you want to create a more static view, I would say, of a Kanban style layout. So it would be similar to having like profile pictures of your employees with information about their profile where it's not really going through stages. This would be like cards. So the map view is super awesome if you have, let's say, a field service type of a workflow where you have employees going out into different areas in the world or in the US or wherever, and you want to be able to display certain addresses dynamically on the map. This is going to be it. Pivot boards is exactly what it is. This is advanced stuff when you want to look at multi-dimensional data analysis and kind of compare and contrast data into multi-level groupings. And that's pretty much it. These ones right here, the roadmap, velocity, and planned widgets, these are for another Monday product known as Monday Dev. So it's not for this Monday work management product. So we don't have to worry about that. And again, some of these will kind of repeat. We have everything here. Countdown, quote of the day, some fun stuff. Another cool thing I will just really quickly highlight on is this one called Embed Everything. So what this is if I was just to put this, we could forget about these ones right here, let's just say. And I'm already starting to lose my vocabulary. if I dock this embed everything widget and I click add a site, let's say Google. So what this is going to do is it's going to dynamically embed the HTML, the way a certain website looks, directly in here. It doesn't always work because certain websites might have a blocker or something of that sort that does not allow the transmission of that website to Monday. But we'll see if Google can work. Yeah, see, we can't display this link. Certain links don't allow it to work. Let me see. Microsoft.com. Let's see if it'll do that. Yep, it did that. See? So you can just scroll literally Microsoft's web page right from here. It's super, super awesome, especially if you want to dynamically embed a site or any sort of HTML dynamic link over here to show it as a view. So getting back to the understanding of the dashboard versus non-dashboard. So we'll just kind of leave this here. So this was the customizable view. Let me undock this. So that was that Microsoft embed everything. Obviously, we could put all those widgets in there. What I would suggest is this, though. If you are going to create a customizable view with multiple widgets, unless it's super particular to really have it on this board view, if you're going to use multiple widgets, I always recommend to use the separate dashboard type of asset right here, because you could just treat this as its own thing and it doesn't have to be attached to a certain board. And also, here is why you want to use this dashboard as opposed to the customizable view in the boards area. The customizable view, so right what we have here, or any of these widgets, they are only sourcing data from this board itself, just this table. It's only pulling data from here. But if I was needing to create a dashboard that looks at multiple projects, the only way we could do that is through this dashboard. So I'll give you guys an example. Let's look at projects Whiskey, Romeo, and Alpha. They're almost exactly the same thing because we just duplicated these just for an example to show. But if we wanted to take a look at these three projects in detail from a dashboard summary perspective, you remember how these three projects, they are the lower level of the high level, low level project management type of philosophy. So if these boards were being connected through the connect board column back up to the portfolio, you guys remember that? Where we connected it and then we could show the summaries with the mirror columns and show the summary of the statuses over here. A similar functionality works whenever we connect these low-level boards to a dashboard. With this separate dashboard asset, we're able to connect to multiple boards instead of viewing widget data from a single board. So we just went over the views area and we saw how we have single widget views that pull data from here in the table and display it across as a single widget. And now what we're going to do, as we could see, the Gantt, chart, calendar, and Kanban views. So what we're going to do right now is demonstrate to you essentially what the customizable view was going to do, where we have multiple widgets in one view, but now we're going to do it at the dashboard level, because at the dashboard level, we can connect to multiple boards. So if you remember what we discussed, whenever we have a widget that is on a single board over here, it's only pulling data from that one board. But if we wanted to represent the summation of data from multiple boards onto one dashboard, kind of the same way where if we went into the portfolio board and I know we discussed this a little bit before, but how the connect board column connects a column to multiple boards to then pull in data and create a summary of it. We're kind of doing the same thing, but we're pulling these multiple boards instead of into a connect board column, we are pulling it into an actual dashboard interface. So let's right now try to do this with the projects Whiskey, Romeo, and Alpha. So let's assume we're trying to create a portfolio dashboard of these three projects. So what we would do is do connect boards, and we're just going to find Whiskey, connect this one, Romeo, and we also connect Alpha. Excellent. So now we are good here. And what we have now is the three boards connected. And let's say we want to get some widgets going to represent this project data of each of these individual projects overall as a summary. So let's assume we're trying to look at the status of all of these projects. And again, to give you guys a tip, the dashboards are very helpful when you are connecting boards that have a very similar structure. So they have to be kind of on the same level, such as they're all projects, they are all on the same level, and they all have the similar, I won't say the same, but it would be preferred to be the same, but the similar structure of the columns that we're using, the type of data that we're collecting in it. We want them to be essentially as close in similarity as possible, because that is going to make better sense in the dashboard, because we're trying to create a comparison and a summary of multiple boards against each other. So let's just say we want to look at all of the tasks for all of the projects in one dashboard. So we know Whiskey, Romeo, and Alpha have the same status column for these tasks. So if we go to project dashboard, we can do this by, let's go to more widgets. Let's say this one. It is the easiest way to look at a summary of all the tasks. So I will do a battery widget, and let's just make this a little bit bigger. And we just go here into the settings, make sure that all of the settings are correct. So as we could see here, status 3 of 3, this is saying that 3 out of the 3 boards have this column. So that is exactly what we're saying. We want to make sure we have the same column types within each of those boards that we've connected. Now, if that's not the case, and you do have stuff that is slightly different, you can go to the 1-by-1 and choose the specific columns you want to use to pull in that data. Now, we could kind of do this the same way as the all at once using this 1-by-1, and all we have to do is on each of these boards, we select that status column. It becomes the same thing. But the all at once is doing it automatically because it finds a status column with the same column name in each of those boards. Monday automatically recognizes it that these are supposed to be automatically pulled in. And as we could see, these are all of the tasks that we have across each of those 3 projects, and how many of them are done, how many are future steps, and how many are working on it. Super cool, super easy. And then obviously we discussed the battery widget previously too, that we can do some customizations. Here we could see the boards that are connected, and you could see over here, if I was to disconnect the boards, you'll see the data kind of shifting around. Oh, well, actually, in this case, it's not shifting around because we basically duplicated each of these 3 boards. But assuming that the tasks had different completions, you would see this actually changing around. But Alpha, Whiskey, and Romeo are essentially duplicates of each other. But we're just showing the connection that, hey, we could disconnect whatever boards we want or connect them back again. And then, of course, all the other customizations of what groups we want to show across each of the 3 boards. which columns to show if we wanted to, then show more column data. But in this case, this doesn't make sense anyway, because this is just a battery widget that we are looking at in terms of just a single status column. So that's just one example. Let's see if we can have any other boards that, or any other widgets that would make sense for this workflow. So we know we had date columns over here, or timeline columns. We have some dependencies, we have some expenses such as numbers. And of course, in this situation, they're going to be a little bit, it's going to be a little bit harder to tell because we have duplicated these three boards and they have kind of the same data, but you will still see the connections going across. So if I was to go here back into the dashboards, let's see if we could add a few more widgets. So if we do numbers, for instance, let's see what we could customize here. Choose calculation type. We're going to choose the columns. We're going to choose the expenses column, okay? And we are going to see that we could also do this one by one again if we wanted to. Go by each board and just choose the expenses column. And you can see it's kind of adding up as we see. But since, again, we have the same column type in all three boards, we could just use the all at once. But it is good to know the one by one so you could customize the way you want to pull data from certain column types. Over here, we have customization settings. So since this is a dollar value, we could assign the dollar. We know it's a sum. We're adding up the values of each of the three boards into here. So nothing else would make sense necessarily in this specific use case. But I mean, we could say, hey, what if we want to look at the average? We could always do that as well. The average expense per task across all three boards. But in this case, let's say we are just summing it up. Obviously, we could see that it pulls from all three boards. The groups, again, we can choose whatever groups we want to, further customizing what numbers are going to be displayed here. And of course, this is again the column types, but again, we are only using this expenses column type anyway. So if I was to actually click these, it wouldn't really make sense per se for this use case. Again, it doesn't make sense. All we care about is really these ones right here. So let's see if we could add maybe one more example. What did we have in there? What column types? The owners, statuses, durations, maybe something to do with the dates. So let's see if we could add a widget that can pull in these dates and make some sort of sense out of it. So what do we have? The calendar widget would be one of them. We can definitely do the Gantt chart. And actually, let's do the Gantt chart in this case because it's going to show a bit more detail than the calendar. So if I add this widget, and let's actually delete these and let's dock the Gantt chart. So we could kind of see this in a much bigger perspective. So if I go here, I've docked it. We can see here Whiskey, Romeo, and also Alpha. So if I go to AutoFit, you will see that obviously, since these are kind of three copies of each other, we will see all three boards kind of having the similar pattern over here of certain tasks going and connecting to each other. So we could see over here what the dashboard has done is it has taken milestones actually. And milestones, what milestones are single dates. So instead of them being, let's say, a timeline which has two dates going from left to right, it's a singular date. So we could see that, and we could confirm that, of course, in our data. If I was to go over here, do we have singular dates? You know, how is it pulling that? Yep, exactly. So if we look at actually our data right here, the timeline column allows us to use milestones, and I will just see if I could zoom in over here. As you can see, like task 1 and task 2, we have a beginning. I don't want to mouse over it because it changes it, but we have a beginning and an ending date, a beginning and an ending date. And then here we have a single date. And this is a milestone where we are just trying to say, hey, something happened on this specific date. So if I go into the settings for the timeline column, let me see if it's in the settings area. Yeah, show set as milestone. So obviously we have a single date. So this is kind of going to be chosen by default anyway. And there's no other settings really here that would change anything else, as we could see. So it's just in the settings window. We could do set as deadline, obviously disconnect from the duration. But again, in this situation, it was this setting as a milestone. So that's why when we go back into the dashboard, we could see, let me see if I could scroll in. Let's see, do auto fit. Maybe I can put this to months or even weeks. We might be able to see this a bit more clearly. You could see here, task 1 and task 2 have a beginning and end date, and then you have that milestone representing it as that triangle or diamond plate. And again, the whole point of this was to show that the dashboards are showing them one on top of the other. Let's see what sort of customization we could do here if we wanted to. So we are showing them all at once again. The actual date of completion probably in this case would not make sense, because in a Gantt chart, you want to have a consistency of data. So if we're saying that the planned timeline beginning to end is this timeline column, then we should probably just include only this. But if it makes sense for your workflow, you could also add in other columns in it. Just make sure that the Gantt chart will make sense and we're not throwing two different types of data in here if they don't have a relationship towards each other. But let's see again how we work across this. We could do the one by one. See, all three boards, we could choose exactly the column type that we want, or we could just do the all at once and we just do this. As you could see, if I was to take out this date, it's better to take it out in this case just so we have the timeline being compared. The group bys, same thing. We could choose the groups of each of the boards, or we could go one by one, again, right here. And we can also label all at once if we wanted to. Color by, same thing. We're essentially using the same widget functions from the Gantt chart, but just applying it to now a triple view of all three projects. So you still get all of the rest of the features again. So hopefully this has been fun for you guys and informative. And this is, again, a cool way of using the dashboards to take your view type of functionality and use it across multiple boards to make a comparison or to make a certain type of a pattern recognition across multiple boards that we're extracting from. All right, guys, we will see you in the next video.